Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Jacopo Ceccarelli, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's the founder of and&nbsp Yoga. Again, we'll check the pronunciation. Joining us from Florence, Italy. I met him at a yoga festival in Sweden and really loved the fluid nature of his classes. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about how he's invented this, where this comes from. He was actually doing martial arts before I was born in 1977. Strong background in various kinds of traditional yoga, tantric yoga, different kind of things. Trained as a naturopath and a counselor, so pretty broad-based background. So, sir, welcome.
Ciao. Ciao, Mark. How are you?
I'm good today, actually. Yeah, the sun's shining in Brighton. How is Florence?
Oh, yeah, exactly. The spring has come and we have sun, and the temperature is amazing because just maybe 2 weeks ago we were still in the winter, and now it's an amazing warm season, and let's see what happens in the next weeks. We are ready for the summer.
One of my favorite places in the world, Florence. I had a kind of second honeymoon with my wife there, and the cradle of Western civilization, a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah, actually, Florence, it's really a great place with a long history. And it was a magic place for me to discover many of the things that I have found on the path of developing myself on the journey of yoga.
Well, let's hear a little bit about that journey. What was your journey with the body, starting, according to your bio, in 1977?
Well, yeah, I was born actually in 1967, so I'm now 51. And when I was a young boy, I was introduced to martial arts from a family member. And it was my first experience with body work, at the same time with some basic introduction to meditation. So I was doing judo, karate in the beginning, and it was not so fluid, but one day I met a karate teacher who was doing a work of integration between different styles of martial arts from Japan and China. So he introduced me to the idea of integration, which later on, many years later, led me into the concept of and&nbsp yoga, which means actually integration. So it started all over when I was 11 with these martial arts. And of course, when you grow up and you're a little bit more mature, you want to run after girls and you're not so interested in sports. Or in inner growth so much, till the moment in which you find, you meet your lack of self-confidence, or you find yourself confused about the meaning of life. And then I started to investigate again about what's the meaning of life, what should I do to feel happy, to have good relationships with people. And slowly, yoga came into the way.
Great. And what are some of the main kind of styles of yoga or approaches to yoga that you trained in before making your own system?
Well, after this period of, the bubble of doing nothing really special, when I started experiencing in yoga, I was, of course, looking for traditional yoga, and it was, the end of the 80s, so there was not so much about yoga in Italy. There were traditional schools, and mainly you had to go to few teachers who were really dedicated to transmit the yoga tradition in the way it was meant to be in the past. So I was so fascinated that I decided to go in India, to go to the source and learn from the masters directly. So when I was in India, I went to visit different ashrams. I went for a 6-month journey in the beginning, and it was enough time to visit many ashrams. And I went to research in the Shivananda, Satyananda, Yogananda, Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharishi, all those teachers who were passing the yoga more on a spiritual concept rather than a physical approach. And in a while, I was also going back to martial arts for something more fluid. So I met the Chinese arts like Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Qigong. So when I went to India, I started to train in different traditional styles of yoga. But when I came back to Italy, I was still searching, experiencing, researching. And I found that at that time was a good school to learn from the Iyengar yoga, where alignment was very important and all the anatomic informations about how to deal with your body in a safe way. But it wasn't for me still yet satisfying to the point in which I was looking for something more um, natural for my body. So after experiencing Iyengar yoga, Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, and all those derivations like Vinyasa yoga, power yoga, I tried, of course, to experience different things, and from each approach, I've learned something good, and also I've learned something which is probably not so natural to do with the body. So slowly, I can say it was not from one day to the other that I developed Anukalana Yoga, but slowly, in my mind, the 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 idea was how can I make this yoga to be more natural for my constitution, my skeleton, my mental attitude. How can I adapt the yoga practice to my needs, to my way of being, to my way of living on this planet, with this body in this moment?
Yeah, I experienced a couple of classes with you in Sweden. Really enjoyed them. So thank you again for those, and hang out with you a little bit there at that festival and the Yoda Festival. And I remember the style was very fluid, kind of organic. You know, I could see the martial arts influence in it, you know, some sort of fluid, wide stances, but also kind of an Italian feel, if I dare say that. It had kind of sensual Italian feel to it. Is that fair to say?
What you experienced, and I'm very happy that you liked, it's the result of many years of research in that direction, of looking for a more natural way of treating the body as you open it and lengthen it. And of course, as an Italian, I can say that probably a little bit of Mediterranean touch was integrated into this practice. In Italy, we like to be kind of expressive, open, celebrating, chanting, chatting, all these kind of things. You know, if you go in a restaurant and you meet Italian people, you will find they will always move their hands as they speak, and probably speak loud, speak a lot, joke, laugh, and make noise. So Anukalana is probably influenced by my Italian attitude of trying to express myself. So through movement, I found that it's possible also to express things that you hold inside, and even simple normal things you accumulate during the daytime on a daily basis. You stay in the office, you go on the bus, and you cannot say things that you feel in the middle of people. So when you practice yoga, you can express all these little things that you keep inside, maybe just by moving an arm or a leg in a more wide way, and using the space around you to let the energy move, flow, and recharge also. No? So, yeah, but when we go to the fluid aspect, that exactly is the result of the research I've done. And it's still a process in which I'm still searching for more details. The body, is made of 80% of fluid matter. Some people, they say the body is made of 80% of water, but if we go really into details, it's more realistic to say that it's 80% of fluid matter. Sometimes it's very liquid, sometimes it's in the shape of a gel, and this fluid matter needs to be constantly maintained to a level of fluidity. When we lose this, then aging starts. Diseases can develop because tissues become dry, and nutrients, I would say vitamins, minerals, and stuff that are coming with the bloodstreams, they don't reach the cells because of the tissues, they are not fluid anymore. So in order to prevent this, and in order to respect the nature of the body, I found that the best way to move as you practice yoga from one asana to the other is to be super fluid. This is, of course, a tendency that many yoga teachers are trying to approach, but in Anukana, we really dedicated a lot of attention in how every joint of the body, every district of the body, and every segment of the body can be included in a kind of wall movement based on fluid approach.
Yeah, like a lot of yoga that I see out there has always had this slightly stiff, linear, straight line, wooden feel, and that never, it just in my body felt right. It never felt pleasurable. And again, this may be the Italian cultural influence. Like it never felt, I love Italy for a holiday because of just the embracing of pleasure as an important thing. And for me, that linear stiff yoga just never felt pleasurable. And I thought something's got to be up with that. And yeah, it's good to have discipline. But as you say, what about the expressiveness? You know, discipline and sometimes containment and boundaries is useful as in body practice. But, I just saw a lack of expressiveness in yoga compared to, say, free dance.
Yeah, very interesting question. Well, we can say that in everything, the middle path usually is the good solution. Now, like Buddha was teaching thousands of years ago, that if you are too extreme in one sense or in the other, you're never on the right path. But when you find the middle way, then it's a good solution. And we can say that, let's see if I can explain about that. Human body is made in such a way that there's no straight lines in the body. There's not a single straight line in the structure of our body. If you open the body and look at the bones, the tissues, everything there is circular, spiral. Every shape in the body is rounded somehow. If you take even the more straight bone in the body and you observe it from a close perspective, you will find out there are spirals into it. There's no straight lines. So, as you said, when we try to be stiff and look for lines in our body when we do yoga, it is very unnatural and sometimes it feels uncomfortable, especially for people who has done some previous body work with fluidity, like you also did, as you told me when we were in Sweden, with Aikido or martial arts, where you learn how to be to move in a circular way in order to manage the energy that is moving around the people when you are interacting in a martial art. No? Yeah. So this thing is in our body. But I have to say that I found, experiencing on myself and then on my students, that there is a stage in which we need to experience these straight lines. Because as you said before, discipline is very important if you want to achieve something in something like yoga or Taoism, in a journey for self-development. If you don't have discipline, you will get nowhere. So, but when discipline becomes the main thing, then you lose your freedom to explore and find out for yourself what is good for you on the path. So a good balance between discipline and freedom will be the middle way that I will always now try to follow and to suggest to my students to follow. And how do I find it in yoga? I found this, for example, when people come to my yoga studio, my teacher trainings, in the beginning, I try to let them find straight lines, but with softness. I mean, you can be in a trikonasana, which is a triangle pose, which even the name of the asana says there are lines into this pose. And I teach the people how to obtain that shape in a soft way, without straining the joints, without pulling too much on muscles, but how to enter in this pose is the big difference. From a fluid movement, enter into a straight alignment. That's the key for the beginners to learn how the body is made. And then in a second level, then I teach these students to make all those lines round. I don't know if in English I'm explaining properly, but for example, a trikonasana, when it's like a pose done between two glasses, no, two big glasses, and you are in the middle, you do the pose, you're very flat, very straight. Then you can imagine to remove these glasses, which are boundaries actually, and you try to arch your spine, to move the hand away from the foot, and develop a triangle on the floor to support yourself with the 2 feet and 1 hand, and then you arch yourself. You will find yourself in a more natural extension for your body. And new things can happen because, well, difficult to explain it without pictures or without a video about this, but when you are in a flat pose with straight alignment, your chest probably doesn't open so much as when you do it with circular lines.
Yeah, it just seems like that's the way the grain of the wood is, that's the way the body wants to move, and going with that, for me, always, as I said, I had this experience with Aikido of not going against other people's force and not going angular.
Yeah.
It's never smart, never a good strategy. And then learning that, okay, in my own body, the same thing applies. This is really, you talk about softness. And for me, your yoga looks and feels how Italian sounds. I remember you walking into the room in Sweden, and it's kind of North European environment, and you come in and you're kind of like a cat with a long tail. And you're kind of like flirting a little bit with, 100 kind of people in the room. And it's a kind of soft, playful, some discipline, some structure too. But I remember even your teaching style had a kind of fluid softness to it that was a nice contrast with a lot of what else, I've seen in yoga.
Nice. Yeah.
So I've seen you're also trained as a naturopath and a counselor. So that's a bit different from most yoga teachers. Is there an influence there for you?
Yeah, sure, of course. When I started teaching yoga, I realized I needed more tools to help my students with their health issues. And as long as I started to practice as a naturopath, I have learned that people usually develop physical issues on the basis of emotional problems. So I decided to train again as a counselor, and all those years have influenced a lot my yoga practice. On one side, while I was training as a naturopath, I had the opportunity to study with some osteopaths, a special body approach called Ortho-Bionomy. And this was really revealing a lot of interesting things about how to approach the tensions in the body, which influenced my yoga practice. And that was the starting point, if I have to really track on time a moment in which Ankara started to develop. It was that moment in which I realized, there's something more natural I can do with my body on the basis of what I've learned from these osteopaths. And so I tried to develop new movements, techniques, ways of letting the tensions go away from the body. And counseling brought another main key concept in my mind, which was the idea that, which is actually the same thing that you find in naturopathy, that the body and the mind, they have already everything we need in order to be happy. We just need to open the path for these things. We don't need to develop things which are not already inside us. And by using the body in a more natural way, and by using the mind in a more natural way, these inner resources will come out, become active, and let the happiness to be a natural consequence. When we say happiness, of course, is a big word, but we can say that a sense of constant deep well-being can be developed if the yoga practice on the physical and mental level is done properly and in a natural way. And that constant sense of well-being can be sometimes interrupted by some bad emotions during the day, like anger, or sadness. But when your practice is natural and strong and constant, these emotions will just manifest as something you experience and learn from it. And then they will go in the background and your sense of well-being will take place again. So I have used as many tools as I could, which I've learned from naturopathy, from counseling, and of course from yoga and meditation, to develop a system to practice an healthy way of living. And of course, I can say that my yoga teachers, my Indian yoga teachers, were the main basis, but they were also encouraging me to keep researching, keep experimenting, and comparing things in order to understand what was good to make my yoga practice more effective, more efficient, and more natural. So yes, Anukalana is of course based on traditional yoga, but it has been developed also with things that come from naturopathy, counseling, and many also Taoism because of my experience in martial arts. And I'm open to any new thing to discover and to find for this process of integration. Because the more I study, the more I experience, the more I know that I know nothing.
Yeah, and I'm kind of going back to school for the next few years to study various embodied arts, and it's kind of like, oh my God, there's so much I don't know now. I know a little bit about what's out there, it's opening up. It's ridiculous. Maybe you can speak a little bit about this East-West combination, because on the one hand, we've talked about things from the West, like counselling and Italian culture. We've talked about, you really did the Eastern thing, going into Italy and doing the martial arts from the East. How do you think these things fit together in the modern yoga world? Because some people just try and do it the Eastern way, some people just do it the Western way and reject that. How you've given it a pretty Eastern name for a guy from Florence, right? So how the stance on how East and West can be integrated?
Well, actually, my first experiences in yoga were in the East. So for a long time, I was just into that. Almost, I can say, rejecting the Western approach. Mm-hmm. But when it became a main part of my life, when teaching and organizing workshops, seminars, training people became something very predominant in my life, I had to admit that the Western world has so much to give in order to make the practice even more safe for the people. Of course, all we know in yoga about anatomy mainly comes from the West. I speak about anatomy. About physiology, Indian people, they already have a lot of knowledge because, of course, Ayurveda has brought a lot of knowledge into how the body works. But in order to study the skeleton, which is you can see the basics, of the yoga practice in the beginning. If you do a yoga practice which is safe for the skeleton, then you already started with the right foot and you are preparing for the benefits to manifest.
Yeah, I think this is what I can jump in there. Like most people don't realize that in Asian cultures, there just was terrible understanding of anatomy. That just wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't till actually Western people cut off bodies, and in Italy and Britain, and other places, that people really understood the internal anatomy. And that's not to say that the Eastern arts didn't understand the other wonderful aspects of the body, but it's not true to say they understood anatomy. That's just not true.
Yeah. Well, it happened that this contribution of the Western world made the yoga more aware, especially for, if you go in India, you will see people having a kind of DNA predisposition for flexibility. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, for thousands of years, they've been eating in a different way. They have different DNA. They practice yoga. I don't say that every Indian people practice yoga, but in schools, they have it, which we just now started to have yoga in schools for kids. So there's a completely different physical experience in the West and the East. Anyway, the Western world contributed also not only for the anatomy knowledge, but also for the communication skills and also for didactics. When I was studying in India, there was a little bit of confusion. Now, information were passed just one day by the other, as the teacher was feeling, okay, today I teach you this, oh, tomorrow I will teach you that. And in the West, I found interesting the amazing knowledge we have about communication, which make the didactics and apprenticeship, I don't know in English the word, the way to learn to be more effective.
Yeah, teaching methodologies better, just different, but also better generally in the West, like breaking things down and adding structure to teaching. It kind of loses some of the chaotic feel. And, you know, for me also, there's things about less abusive student-teacher relationships, and the therapeutic and counselling traditions just bring so much. The sort of shadow side that we just see again and again and again in teachers who are either Eastern or doing things in an Eastern way.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I remember a few monks. I've been studying with yoga monks in the first 10 years and of my journey to yoga. And some, of course, most of these monks were Indian, but some people from the West went to India to join my spiritual master, and they became monks. And some of them, they were from Australia, some of them, they were from Europe, and some from America. And when I was studying even meditation and philosophy with these monks, I was learning a lot more on the technical level. So they were really, in a detailed way, explaining me all the different things that I needed to know in order to make my meditation very effective. On the other side, the Indian monks, they were bringing a lot of culture and poetry and emotion into the process of teaching, because mainly they teach through stories, or they just let you go through deep philosophy concepts. And so the two things together, they were creating a complete process of learning. I feel very grateful for having had the opportunity to learn from teachers with both backgrounds, so that I could develop a point of view which is wide, 360 degree. Because today, sometimes I still have discussions with other yoga teachers who may not be so they don't agree very much about this Western approach we have to yoga, and they are just stuck with the tradition. And sometimes it's very hard to make them understand that it's very useful instead to be open-minded and to see the good in both parts. So it was kind of something we needed, this meeting between West and East for the spiritual development of people in this modern age. Otherwise, everyone would have remained with his own culture and his own point of view. The only problem is that from the Western world, we have brought a lot of business into the yoga. But I have to admit that Indian people, they didn't really just rejected it, because I am planning a trip in India now in September, and all of my friends who went there recently, they told me, Jacopo, India is not the same as we went a long time ago. Now it's a big business about yoga everywhere, and all that poetry, all that spiritual cloud is gone. You know? I don't believe that. I believe you just have to search a little bit more intensely to find the roots of the yoga in that big market. But at least because of this big business that people have made around yoga, now yoga is well known everywhere in the world. I remember even 10, 15 years ago, I was looked by the people as an alien because I was doing yoga 15 years ago. Yeah. Now people say, oh, you do yoga, please teach me. Everywhere. Everywhere.
And
so
it's you are sitting in the birthplace of capitalism. I mean, that bridge over the river in Florence, that's literally the place where the modern business world was born. That was the beginning of the economic system of the Western world, not 2 kilometers from where you may be sitting, you know?
Yeah. It's very funny. Yeah, Florence was, for a long period, few centuries ago, the capital of Europe for what was concerning banks, business, money, power. And yes, it's true. We still feel that kind of atmosphere, even if now the main business of this town is tourism, of course, because there's a lot of history, ancient monuments, things to see and learn. But we can still breathe that subtle vibration, which has ancient roots here. And well, what to say? I have learned how to make my living out of yoga in a good way, but always trying to keep my mind on one very important point. One day I will die, and all those money, all those physical, material things that I was able to gain, they will just mean nothing in that moment. So this is what I've learned from the Indian people. Remember, one day you have to die, so every day of your life, just work hard to prepare yourself for that moment. And actually, I can say that was one of the most important teaching I've learned from the Indian spirituality. To remember that this is just a very short time, very, I mean, illusion. It's an illusion, not Maya. And to find a balance between this concept, to keep in mind if you want to live as a yogi, and the idea that you have to earn your living, especially in a country like this where you pay, I'm not joking, 70% of taxes at the end of the game. It's a kind of a challenge. You have to think every day, oh, how do I pay the rent of the studio? How do I make sure the next teacher training is going to be successful? And during the rest of the time, you want to close your eyes, transcend the world, and go into a spiritual space. So it's a kind of a challenge, you know. When you are in the physical world, you would like to be in the spiritual bubble. When you are in the spiritual bubble, worries about the physical world come. And this is something that I think every full-time yogi has to face in his life.
Yeah, it's a tricky integration, running a business, and a lot of my, half of my days are spent teaching and really deeply immersed in body practice and community, and the other half I'm in an office, and I'm sending emails and I'm looking at social media and I'm talking to my accountant and phoning my lawyer and, just business kind of stuff. And I'm not sitting in the Himalayas somewhere. And that integration, to come back to what my company's called and your style of yoga is called, my business company is called Integration Training. That integration of West and East is I find both a beautiful challenge and also a challenge. It's not the easy.
Yes, it's not very easy, but it's also a good way to have opportunities to learn from daily life, how to be, again, it's the point you were focusing before, how to balance between discipline and the possibility to express yourself in a more free way. It's daily life, it gives you a lot of possibility to do this because, for example, now in this moment, my yoga school is well known in Italy. We have very well, people come from all over Italy and sometimes from other countries for teacher trainings, and we are very busy with this activity. And sometimes we have to face problems and to be creative in finding solutions. Sometimes it is a challenge, but sometimes it's also fun when it comes to be in a yoga school to solve problems. I don't know if you understand what I mean. You have more more ways to say, okay, I will solve this problem in that way or that way, just because yoga offers you a lot of open windows in your mind to look for with more fantasy about solutions. So
I enjoy that aspect of teaching as well. I was teaching online last night and I suddenly realized I wanted to do an exercise that I'd only ever taught in person, and I had to kind of be creative with that. And the business is always throwing creative challenge. Okay, how do we work with this budget now that someone's dropped out of the course and we have less money than we thought we have, or, you know, there's always these creative challenges around marketing and business, which I find are actually quite a cool creative practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now also with technology, we can also even be even more into the yoga world. Sometimes people, for example, some people they don't like so much all these activity about online yoga courses. But even if in the beginning I was also a little bit skeptical about this, now I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people who don't have the chance to move into a yoga studio to learn, to have the possibility to stay at their home and anyway follow good teachers and get good instructions for making their life better. And this can be a very good solution. For example, when you have no time to reach more students who are asking for your presence. So we have so many possibilities. For example, now I have to admit that I love technology for a way. And I am experiencing a little bit with virtual reality. And as a counselor, I can say this is an amazing tool for having the people to work with their own issues, emotional issues or existential issues in a more immersive way, thanks to this technology that is very quickly developing. And I have already visualized as in the future, this can be an opportunity for the people to practice on their mat, having the immersive feeling to be in the class with other students and the teacher, thanks to a 360-degree webcam and a virtual reality headset. And even if it's so scary now to think about this, because what will be the world once we will be used to this technology in the same way we use smartphones now. But on the other hand, I say, wow, how many people will be able to experience yoga just for fun in the beginning, to find out later how deep, transformative, and important is to take steps in such a sacred path like this.
Yeah, there's scalability, isn't there? Like we have 110 people booked on training with my teacher that I've organized online, and it's you know, it's pretty special. I can bring him 110 people. He's too sick to travel now, so most of them wouldn't have the opportunity to go to Ohio to train with him. So that's, you know, an access thing. It's also cheaper because, you know, we can offer the course at a much cheaper price because of the scale, so it builds access to people. Or just at lunchtime today, I did an online yoga class. I only had an hour for lunch, and I did 45-minute class online because I didn't have time to go to the normal center I go to, and, you know, that takes at least an hour and a quarter for the class and travel. So it was great. You know, I did a class with a teacher, and I was in the teacher's actual class at Tri Yoga 2 weeks ago, Tara Judell. So it was great because it was like following up from an actual face-to-face class that I did, but much easier and much cheaper, you know?
Wow, great. Yeah.
I think there's another way you could work with technology that's even more immersive than virtual reality, which would be, it would be possible to put on lightweight suits that actually moved you into the same shape the teacher was making. Now, of course,
oh, wow.
Yeah, this technology is pretty much already there. It's not so far off. So it would be like a kind of vest you would put on and leggings you put on, like they use for motion capture when they make, like, you know, animations or for green screen movies. And essentially, the teacher would be moving and your body would be moving through the positions. And of course, you then have to learn to do it for yourself. But essentially, it's like having a full body adjustment. And there's dangers in this and there's problems with this somatically, but it's a hell of an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that can be, as you said, on one side it can be dangerous, but on the other side, wow, can be super, very, very interesting. Yeah, I guess in this moment we are talking about this and we find a common interest in technology. I guess how some people may react to this, some traditionalists. But I have to say that when we go back in time and think about the development of yoga, I'm now talking about meditation. In the beginning, as I have understood, when there were no informations about how to go inward and find your soul, from your true self, or the connection with the essence of being, there was nothing else than vipassana. Just sit down, listen to your heart, feel your breath, observe your thoughts and stuff like this. And as I understand, for example, Tantra is the science where we find chakras, yantras, mantras, and all these informations about tools, techniques, and other things we can use to go in that deep space. If you compare the vipassana practice, the passive meditation, so vipassana, zazen, and stuff like this, with the more active meditation you do in Tantra, when you visualize geometrical shapes, chakras, deities, and different things, and you verbalize mantras, and you bring ideas into the mind in a very active way, we can see that as technology. So if we move that back in time and we think about all this science, it is actually, if you ever tried tantric meditation, it is like going into a virtual reality. You sit down, you visualize, you verbalize, you recreate inside yourself shapes and sounds which have an effect on your mind, on your body, and eventually will lead you to a different state of consciousness. So today, if I compare virtual reality with this, of course, it's a different matter, but it's very similar. It's like some yogis, they find out, okay, you can find who you are just by observing yourself. But if you start using these tools, you will get there much quicker and faster. So it is very interesting to see how technology today can be seen as a tool to make, to have some help in the beginning to progress quickly to the point in which you are ready to go on your own legs without the help of all these tools, and proceed the practice on your mat, and maybe just once in a while go to your teacher and get some advice on to make it better and so on. So some people, they are not really liking technology so much, but eventually if the use of technology is intelligent, it can help us a lot. It's like a knife. If you use a knife to cut the bread, it's a very good thing. If you use the knife to cut some people, it's not a good thing. So depends the use we make about this stuff.
Yes.
And well, I was just closing this to say that as Anukkah is integration, we are always looking for new ideas on how to make the learning of yoga and the practice of yoga more easy and natural for the people. So now we have moved into this talk about technology. So yeah, for example, in Ankara, we are open to the idea that technology can help people. But to bring it back, when you talk about biomechanics, it is technology again. It's the science of how the bones and the different tissues around the bones should be moved properly in order to open the body. So when you study biomechanics and you develop a special way to move, it is somehow a level of technology. It's methodology, but from my point of view, it's a technology that we apply into the practice of yoga. If you compare it to the Eastern world, where without these informations, people, they were just moving instinctively. You understand what I mean?
Yeah. It reminds me of the Renaissance, really. I was studying the Renaissance a lot while I was in Florence. And, there was this time in Western Europe where we're living in the Dark Ages and it was superstitious. And then some people said, hey, let's look at the science, let's actually see what's in a human body. And they did dissections, they looked at the hips and the sort of physical realities. But what was interesting to me in Florence, looking at the Renaissance, was that it was also aesthetic. There was also great art flourishing. And also it wasn't considered at odds with spirituality. It was like, we're going to make this great art to enhance people spiritually, and the kind of science. So people like Leonardo da Vinci, they were scientists, they were artists, and they were also deeply spiritual people. That is the Renaissance man, you know, the Renaissance ideal. And it strikes me you're doing something a little bit similar with the kind of genuine integration you're talking about. You know, you're going from Tantra to virtual reality. And I agree with you, many people kind of pick a side. You know, they either go Western or they go Eastern. And the genuine integration is quite tricky. So this I might call this Renaissance man of yoga or something like that, you know?
Wow, nice. Yeah, actually, it's true. I love Leonardo, in fact. And if you could see my studio, I have a lot of these paintings from Leonardo, no? The notes from his book, because they remind me always about this kind of connection that you were speaking about, art, science, spirituality, all mixing together. And it is, wow, so inspiring. And yeah, actually, I love to do research to find new ways to integrate things in a way which is similar, because, for example, another aspect of Ankara yoga is the integration, of course, with some movement from martial arts, but which is an art. But especially now we are developing a branch of Ankara, which is totally developed on the basis of integration with dance. And this is called Natana yoga. Natana means dance. And it's an integration that we are trying to develop, because dance and yoga were sister disciplines in the very ancient times in India. And my Indian spiritual guru, he was saying that spiritual people will always try to, in a certain moment of their life, move into the artistic field. And we can have a proof about this in every age, every culture, every religion. We see that art is always together with spirituality. So, especially in yoga, it is said that Shiva, the father of yoga, was teaching yoga to his wife Parvati through a dance in which he was showing all the different asanas by dancing. So we decided already a long time ago to do this integration, but now the time has come. The good people to help me in this process is now around, and we are developing a way to integrate yoga and dance in a way which is not just mixing up the two things, because there's a big difference between integration and mixing things.
Yeah, nice distinction. Yeah. It's not just sort of modern pluralism of throwing it all together in a bucket, you know. There's a difference between making a fusion of Italian cuisine and Indian cuisine and just kind of mixing it together in a bucket. That's two different things, right?
Exactly. Especially integration has to be done respecting few points. One is the two things you integrate, they should go in the same direction. I mean, it's possible to integrate few disciplines, but not always. Because if they don't share the same principles, basic principles, integration is not really so easy. And at the same time, if the things they don't share the same objectives, the same goals, it is not so easy. So if you compare dance and yoga, and you want to integrate them together, in the beginning it may seem that they don't match, because you say, well, yoga is for my spiritual development, dance is for artistic purpose. But if you work back in the past and you look at how dance was used by humankind in the past, it was always in sacred moments or celebration of some special moments in which dance was a tool to elevate the mind of the people. Both the people who dance, both the people who is observing the dancers. And the practice of yoga asanas is also there to elevate the mind and prepare it for the practice of meditation.
Yeah, there's some kind of alignment there, right? There's some kind of way in which there's the Indian temple dance tradition, also, as I understand it, the word asana is mostly seat, but there was also other words in Sanskrit around spontaneous movements and kind of flows that were kind of not so much just a collection of asanas, but were a much kind of freer form of movement in kind of tantric approaches to yoga. So, it feels like there's a sort of rediscovery there as well as synthesizing and integrating two things that are fundamentally aligned anyway.
Yeah. It is, integration, I believe, is a process human beings have been doing for all the time that we are living on this earth, since the beginning of the humankind. And but I believe this is the age in which we need integration, even as a kind of way out from the big mess we have created on this planet.
Yeah, I think this podcast in some small way is about that. It's not saying, look, this is the one best practice or the one best style. It's saying, and it's not just saying everything's good, like mixing it up in a bucket. It's saying, okay, I feel like we're in the time of integration now, rather than the time of going to India and, sticking feathers up your ass and pretending you're a chicken. It just feels like there's a different stage that the world needs now.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. It's a different moment in which through communication we have the possibility to meet with other cultures. It's very easy now through the media to get in touch with teachers from the other side of the world, sharing their knowledge and have intuitions about your knowledge, and their knowledge can meet together and create new things. There's this sentence, I don't know if I can translate it properly in English, but it is, the whole is more than the sum of the parts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That is the main concept I kept in my mind during the integration research I've done, because the idea was to bring out something which is not just yoga plus dance, but something which is more than this. And it's the idea is still it is yoga, but it is more yoga than before. Okay, it is more complete. So the integration with martial arts, with dance, with naturopathy concept, with communication skills, with biomechanic knowledge, and all these things, they all have the purpose to bring out something which is more yoga, not something else. More yoga, more natural, more available for everybody. This is the idea. So, for example, some yoga approaches which I've tried, they are very difficult for some people, and many people, they just drop out. And I have students who come to my workshops sometimes and they say, I was losing my hope into the possibility to be a yogi, but now that I find that I can be soft and fluid, I trust more that I can practice this discipline. And of course, yes, you don't need to force yourself into the practice. So my idea behind the research I've been doing all these years is, how can this be more normal, simple, available for everybody? And there's still a lot more we can know. For example, the modern science about fascia and all the new concept we have in anatomy about this has opened infinite windows for finding out, infinite doors to explore rooms with a lot of possibilities. And the work I'm doing in this sense, together with one of the teachers in my teacher training, which is an osteopath, we are looking for more subtle ways to release tensions as we move into the asanas or as we stay into the asanas, so that this can be transformed into an habit that the person who does Anukana Yoga develop, and this should reach a stage in which, as you accumulate tensions, they are automatically be released, and you don't even have to think about it. And this is going to be the result of a way of using your body during the process of moving, breathing, lengthening, opening, stopping into a pose, and so on. Normal things that we do in yoga, but with a different goal, a different approach, based on the idea that we can develop habits that are a possibility in our brain, but that we still didn't explore yet enough to make it possible. I don't know my English.
No,
Yeah.
You're not only perfect, but beautiful. It's been a pleasure to listen to you. Really,
Nice.
we need to move towards the end. I've been looking at your smiley face on your website. So I want to point to that website because I'd really love people to actually see the kind of fluidity we're talking about. So I want to suggest people go to, so it's AN for November, UK, AL, AN for November again, yoga.com. And on there's various like downloads and sequences that people can have a look at. Is there anywhere else people will find you, like on YouTube or other things?
Oh, yes. There's my YouTube channel, Kalana Yoga, always. They can find the same way. Well, I have my personal page on Facebook, but mainly I post video reels in which I speak about stuff in Italian. So for international English-speaking people, will be a little bit different. Maybe in the future I will have this translated with a voiceover. But mainly the website anukalanayoga.com is the main place. People can also see some videos or contact me or inquire for the next training and stuff. And it's also
great. And your teacher trainings, are they in Italian or bilingual, or how does if people want to really go into this, can they train if they're not Italian speakers?
Well, they can come because we have bilingual teacher training.
Great.
There will be a simultaneous translation of all the material. The different handouts are already translated in English, and so it's easy to follow. And already people is coming from other countries to learn this practice and the principles behind it.
Okay, well, if you're ever in Brighton, you're very welcome to hang out with me and my wife, have some good food together, hang out, do some yoga. I'm sure I'll be back in Florence one day because it really is one of my favorite places. So I just encourage anyone to visit Florence and do some yoga with you. I think you were away when I was on holiday there. And do you have a final message about the body for the listeners? Do you have a kind of final goodbye message?
Oh, yes. Something very important to remember for people who practice yoga, which took me many years to find out, is remember that yoga is one thing, sport and fitness is another thing. If you can learn how to not mix these two things, but to practice these two things separately, you will have the best results. When you do yoga, you're not making your legs stronger, you're not making your abs, you're not making your arms stronger, you're just making yourself more fluid, soft, relaxed, and you're just looking for surrender, abandon. And you can do these even in the most challenging asanas if you develop the proper practice. And when you do sports, that's the time to make your legs strong, your arms strong, your body fast, quick, and reactive. And these two capacities together, in every moment of your life, they will cooperate. But if you do yoga and try to make your legs strong, you have to contract your muscles to think that you're doing something which is challenging you. And this is not relaxing at all. And you lose at least 50% of the benefits you can get from the practice. Even when you are just on two hands, in an handstand or in a balancing poses, you can be super relaxed, no effort, minimal requirements from your muscles is activated, and you can be really kind of a meditative state. That's what I'm looking for in the practice now after 25 years of experience. And this is what I suggest to all my students. Try to separate very carefully whatever is a physical training from what is yoga. That's it.
Jacopo, beautiful man. You've risked putting me on Italian time today, but I've enjoyed it so much. So it's been really good to talk. Ciao bello.
Hey Mark, I'm waiting for you in Florence. I have some amazing things about old architecture to show you, so please come as soon as you can.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.